When my daughter-in-law told me to leave, I smiled instead of crying. I don't know why I smiled. Maybe it was because my heart had already been breaking for a long time, and in that moment, it simply became quiet. She stood there, near the doorway, her arms crossed, her voice calm but firm. Ami, you don't belong here anymore. I looked at her, then at my son, hoping he would say something, but he didn't. He just looked down, as if the floor had suddenly become more important than me. And in that silence, I understood everything. That day, I picked up my small bag, the same one I had used years ago when I first came to this house. But this time, I wasn't arriving with hope. I was leaving with memories. Soft piano music fades in. I raised my son alone. His father passed away when he was just 6 years old. I still remember that day clearly. The house felt empty, and the silence was heavy. But I didn't have time to sit and cry. My son needed me. He would hold my hand tightly at night and say, Ami, you won't leave me too, right? And I would smile and kiss his forehead. Never, beta. I am always here. I worked hard. I stitched clothes for neighbors, cleaned houses, and sometimes skipped meals so he could eat well. Life was not easy, but I never complained. Every little sacrifice felt worth it when I saw him smile. We didn't have much, but we had each other. Our small home was full of laughter, even in difficult times. On rainy days, we would sit by the window, sharing tea and stories. He would rest his head on my shoulder, and I would feel like the richest woman in the world. Years passed, and my son grew into a kind, gentle man. He studied hard, got a good job, and slowly life became a little easier. The day he brought his first salary home, he placed it in my hands and said, Ami, this is yours. I remember my eyes filling with tears, not because of the money, but because of the love behind it.
Then one day, he told me he wanted to get married. I smiled and said, Of course, beta, it's time. When I first met her, she seemed sweet, polite, soft-spoken. She touched my feet and called me Ammi. That word, it meant so much to me. I thought maybe Allah had sent me a daughter after all these years. The wedding was simple but beautiful. Our house was filled with guests, laughter, and warm lights. I watched my son as he sat beside his bride, and I felt proud. I thought, this is a new chapter for all of us. After the wedding, things were peaceful at first. She would help me in the kitchen, we would cook together, talk about small things, and sometimes laugh. I started to feel less alone. But slowly, very slowly, something began to change. It started with small things. One day, she said, Ami, I'll handle the kitchen now. You should rest. Her tone was polite, but something about it felt different. At first, I thought she was just being caring, so I stepped back. I let her take control. But soon I noticed I was no longer needed there. Then she rearranged the house. The furniture I had chosen over the years was replaced. The curtains I had stitched with my own hands were taken down. This looks more modern, she said with a small smile. I nodded. Yes, it's nice. But inside, it felt like pieces of my life were being quietly erased. My son also began to change. Not suddenly, but slowly, like a fading light. He would come home from work and go straight to their room. Earlier, he used to sit with me, tell me about his day, ask about mine. Now those conversations became shorter. Ami, I'm tired. We'll talk later. Later never came. At dinner, they would sometimes eat in their room. I would sit alone at the table, listening to the sound of cutlery from behind a closed door. I told myself, this is normal. This is how life changes. Children grow up. They build their own world. But I didn't expect to feel like a stranger in my own home. One evening, I overheard her speaking to my son. We need more space, she said quietly. We already have space, he replied. She paused, then said, I mean, for ourselves. There was silence after that. I stood in the hallway, my heart beating slowly. I didn't want to listen, but I couldn't walk away either. She's always around, she added gently. I stepped back into my room before I could hear more. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept staring at the ceiling, thinking about those words, she's always around. I had spent my whole life being around for my son, and now it felt like I was in the way. Days turned into weeks, and the distance grew. She stopped calling me Ammi. Sometimes she would just say up. It was a small change, but it hurt more than I can explain. One morning, I tried to make breakfast like I used to. She walked into the kitchen and said softly, "You don't have to do this anymore." I smiled. "I know, I just wanted to." She didn't say anything, she just took the pan from my hand and placed it aside. That moment stayed with me, not because of what she did, but because of how gently she did it, as if she was removing me from my own life. That turning point came on a quiet afternoon. My son was at work, the house was silent. I was sitting by the window folding clothes. She came and stood near the door. I looked up and smiled. "Beta, do you want tea?" I asked. She shook her head. Then she took a deep breath and said, "Ammi, we need to talk." Her voice was calm, too calm. I put the clothes aside and waited. "It would be better if you stayed somewhere else." For a moment I didn't understand. My mind refused to accept her words. "Somewhere else?" I repeated softly. She nodded. "Yes, maybe with relatives, or somewhere comfortable." Comfortable? I looked around the room. This was my home. Every corner held a memory. Every wall had a story. "And my son?" I asked quietly. She looked down. "He thinks it's for the best." That was the moment my heart broke completely. Not because she said those words, but because he agreed. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I just nodded slowly and said, "Okay." When my son came home, he couldn't look at me. "Ammi," he started, but his voice faded. I placed my hand on his head and said gently, "It's all right, beta." He didn't stop me. I packed my small bag that evening. I folded my clothes carefully, just like I always had. I took a few old photographs, my prayer mat, and a small box of memories. Before leaving, I stood in the living room one last time. The house looked different now, not because of the furniture, but because I no longer belonged there. At the door, I turned back. My son was standing behind me. For a second, I thought he would say, "Ammi, don't go." But he didn't. So I smiled and walked away. I moved into a small room in my sister's house. It wasn't big, but it was peaceful. The first few nights were the hardest. I would wake up, thinking I was still in my old home. Then reality would return, quietly, like a shadow. But slowly I started to accept it. I spent my days in prayer, reading and helping around the house. I learned to live with less, and somehow I found a little peace in that. Weeks turned into months. My son didn't call often. Sometimes days would pass without hearing his voice, but I stopped waiting. Instead, I started remembering, not with pain, but with gratitude. I remembered the little boy who held my hand, the young man who gave me his first salary, the son who once said, "I will never leave you." Maybe life changed him, or maybe this is just how life is. One evening, my phone rang. It was him. "Ammi?" His voice was soft. "Yes, beta," I replied calmly. "I miss you." There was a long pause between us. "I'm fine," I said gently. "I hope you are too." He didn't say much after that, but that one call, it felt like a small light in a long, dark tunnel. I have learned something through all of this. Love doesn't always stay the same. People change, relationships change, and sometimes the place you called home becomes a memory.
But that doesn't mean your love was wasted. Every sacrifice, every sleepless night, every prayer, it all mattered. It shaped a life. It built a future. And even if that future doesn't include you the way you hoped, your love still lives in it. Today, I sit by another window, in another home. The view is different, but the sky is the same. Sometimes I still feel the ache, but it is softer now. I don't hold anger in my heart, only quiet prayers. For my son, for his happiness, for his peace. Because at the end of the day, a mother's love does not ask for a place. It simply exists. And maybe that is enough.